Hey, everybody, welcome to Spill the Novelty, where three girlies shout into the void about our latest book hot takes and obsessions. I'm Abby,
I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kaylee.
and this week we're spilling the tea about a popular Greek retelling of the Trojan War, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So, if you entered the Greek mythology pipeline through Percy Jackson as a child, like we all did, or if you just enjoy a good romantic tragedy, here's the tea.
All right, so we'll jump right in. So we start the book with a very young prince named Patroclus. When he's like 9 or 10 or something, his father brings him to Sparta to present himself as a suitor for Helen, who is a princess of Sparta, and she's like the most beautiful princess of the land or whatever. And long story short, Helen chooses a man named Menelaus to be her husband, and all of the other suitors make an oath that they will protect Helen and Menelaus forever, basically. So personally, I really liked this scene. I don't know much about ancient Greek history, so I wasn't aware of this part of the story. I also didn't really realize that this would come back to be a really big deal later in the book, so I thought the setup was really good. I don't know what y'all thought.
Go ahead, Abby.
So I would say I like this scene, and I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Kaylee, where I don't know as much about mythology. I know things here and there. So I should say I wasn't coming in with the context like of how the story actually goes. But I did like the scene. It felt random to me at the time. I wasn't sure how it was going to tie back in, but I will say it was very rewarding once you get the tie-in. Later on you find out that Patroclus must continue to fight on her behalf because of the oath and everything. But yeah, it was an interesting start, but I really liked the payoff once I realized kind of what the tie-in was going to be.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna be our resident Greek mythology nerd.
Yes.
Okay, because I was full in on the Greek mythology as a youth. I have a card to prove it. Okay, it's this big book of Greek myths that I've had since I was a child. Okay,
Let's
and I read this like
go.
1,000 times. So I was a full nerd even before Percy Jackson. So
Wow.
She liked Greek mythology
She's an
before it was
OG.
cool.
I made
Okay.
Greek
Yeah.
mythology.
She started the trend actually.
Yeah. The Greeks weren't even known before I found them. So you're welcome to everyone. No, but I was super into Greek mythology, so I knew like Patroclus and Achilles. I've even mentioned them in like episodes before, and I'm like, oh, this reminds me of Patroclus and Achilles. And y'all are like, the fuck are you even talking about? And I'm like, don't worry about it. It's okay.
I knew vaguely of the story,
But so I was surprised that Helen got to choose her husband because I didn't remember that from the story. And Odysseus is actually the one that kind of like advocates for her, which we love him for that. But I had to check the lore to be like, did I just forget? I did not forget. She did not originally choose her husband. And the reason why I think this is a weird choice is because in the original tale, the way it felt to me is like, she gets assigned a husband, like all the women did back in the day, and then she kind of falls for this other man, and she chooses to like go be with him. And it's kind of this story of like, it's like a forbidden love kind of thing, and like you can feel sympathetic towards her, even though this caused like all this war and death and whatever, because you're like, well, when you aren't marrying for love, like you can kind of understand how it happens. But with her choosing her husband, it makes me feel less sympathetic towards her because I get it's still maybe not a marriage of love, but I'm like, damn, like you were given the space to like choose, and then we still have to go through all this stuff.
That definitely changes, having not knowing like all of the background. I think I could totally see how that leads to a very different interpretation of the story and stuff. So it's an interesting choice for sure. Yeah. Interesting.
So it felt a little strange to me. And also my other slight beef is like, and you mentioned this, Abby, like he takes the oath to protect them, but then when it comes down to it, he doesn't follow through on the oath. So for the second part of it, I was like, now I really don't understand why we had this scene, because he just like elects not to do it. And I don't know if that is to show us like maybe
that's a good
he's
point.
a coward. Like I don't know what the narrative purpose of it is, because I was instantly like,
Mhm.
oh shit, you know, he's got this oath. This is how Achilles is going to get drawn into it, because he's obviously not going to let Patroclus go into it alone. But they both just kind of
Mhm.
are like, I don't really feel like it. And Achilles' dad is like, all right, bet. And, you know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
that
know.
was really weird.
It's a good point. It's a good setup if it's followed through on, or if it's
Right.
more clear. Because I know we like find out, of course, that Patroclus is like scared and at the thought
Mm-hmm.
of fighting and stuff. But not to jump ahead too much. But then, of course, he does end up, fighting a little bit,
Yeah.
not planned, but he gets into it. So yeah, it's an interesting choice. Not weird, I should say, but just
Yeah.
interesting way to spin it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I liked the scene, but later in the book, I found myself asking, like, what was the point, really? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just interesting.
What
It
was
was
the
just
payoff?
interesting to me. Yeah. But it's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. That's definitely like a big opener too. And so we have this scene and then we jump into after this, Patroclus goes back home and but when he's there, he ends up killing another boy in the back home and it's an accident, but he basically ends up using this like brute strength and kills him over this petty thing and he can't really like keep it in and stuff, so he ends up, I believe, telling his father, if I'm remembering correctly, and then is exiled to Pythia as a result. So when he is in Pythia, he meets Achilles, who is the prince of Pythia.
Hmm.
um, and so in terms of the scene where he ends up killing the kid, I kind of really like this scene, which might be an interesting take. I think it's a good setup to Patroclus's character and something that also like lends itself to a lot of interesting perspective from him later on with Achilles because basically when it's time for Achilles to start fighting, weirdly enough, you would never guess, but Patroclus, yeah, is the one who's killed someone out of the two of them. He has seen death before. He has
True.
caused death before Achilles has, and which is something you wouldn't expect as you get to know their characters more. So I think it both forces Patroclus to confront death really early on, which I think is like an interesting kind of influence on his character, especially someone who's like not combative. And then it also influenced his concern for Achilles, I think, when he starts killing people nonstop later on, because he knows how it felt to accidentally kill one person and how much that weighed on him for so long. And then to see Achilles just, get into this sort of killing spree and really lean into it, I think he's a little concerned about that. So I think it's an interesting setup.
Yeah. I think
But
that's a great point. It definitely sets up his character. And, too, like, I think it's important to note that the Patroclus before this, he's in full like loser mode, and I say that with the most like sympathy. It's just
it's
like it's
true.
so sad. The whole beginning is so sad because he really just takes like L after L. Like, his dad doesn't like him, everyone thinks he's stupid, like, and it's just rough for him, and this kid is like bullying him, and he ends up killing him, and it's giving very like, you know, brute doesn't know his own strength, which I kind of wanted his strength to come back more in the you know, latter parts of the book,
Yeah.
because he kind of still is on loser mode and gets referred to as like weak and small and skinny and stuff. And so
Hmm.
Right.
I was a little surprised by that, versus like, I think it would have been interesting if, to your point, Abby, like, he is so strong, but he chooses to not use that ability because he was so traumatized by this thing that he
Right.
did, and whatever, and it was so scary for him, and it caused all this
Right. If it was more
strife.
intentional of like
Mm-hmm.
him acknowledging that he is strong at least,
Right.
and choosing not to utilize it versus really not believing that he is strong
Yeah,
and then
like a
not use
Yeah.
protector path, you know.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good point.
This scene also is used to, like Abby already mentioned, to kind of propel the plot of Patroclus going to Pythia and meeting Achilles. So it's
Mhm.
like I liked the idea of him being in exile and
Mm-hmm.
not having anyone in his
Yeah.
life, and then having to like lean on Achilles and his family a little bit. I really, yeah, I liked that
Yeah.
plot point.
And I think like his whole time in Pythia with Achilles is so cute. Like he kind of forces his way into Achilles' life. Achilles is like,
Mhm.
all the boys think he's so cool and so strong and blah blah blah, and they all low-key like hate him but have a crush on him, is how it reads to me, because they like want to
Mhm.
be
Oh
him,
yeah.
they want to be his friend, they want to be chosen by him. And there's like this little scene where Patroclus, like, he stops going to like their training or whatever, and Achilles is like, brother, why aren't you going to the training? And he's like, I don't want to. And Achilles is like, okay, but like, how are you gonna lie to get out of it? And Patroclus is
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I haven't even considered lying because I'm but a simple boy. And then he basically convinces Achilles to like adopt him and just be like, can you just be my excuse? And Achilles is like, shit, I guess. Like, I'll do it. And so that's how they start like spending time together. And Achilles is like very quickly like, this is my boy. This is my boy. I'm adopting him. He's
Yeah.
staying in my room. Like, I love this. This is my pal. And everyone's like, all right, okay. And it's just very cute the way that it all unfolds and the way their friendship starts and the little moments
I
they
like the
have.
the lunch table bit, like how one day Achilles was just sitting at Patroclus's lunch table where
Yeah.
he normally sits by himself, and I liked that detail a lot.
Yeah. It's very
Yeah,
cute.
these little small moments that like kind of add up. And yeah, I'm obsessed with the like, do I want to be him? Do I want to be with him? And obviously, they're starting out young, but they're there for longer. And so it's just this kind of like growing feeling. And I think that there's also what's really cute too is like Patroclus, I think even early on is like, kind of annoyed by him, or he just
Mm-hmm.
seems like, when he first meets him, I think when he's like taken to like the throne room or whatever, you can kind of, he's like, oh, he's just, kind of like snooty, doesn't care,
Yeah.
all this kind of thing. And then you get to see that like wall kind of break and stuff. And it's very cute. I
Yeah.
agree.
It's very cute. And so they get very attached to each other. And Achilles' mom is a goddess, okay, and her name is Thetis. And she does not like Patroclus. And she makes this like
Hmm.
extremely clear from like day one. I don't know why. I don't know if we're ever specifically told why. I wouldn't be surprised if she knew that Patroclus led to Achilles' death, like if that was in a prophecy or something. Because that is essentially more or less what happens. Spoilers. But either way, she does not like.
I think it's about Achilles' honor. I think she mentions that like Patroclus is gonna ruin Achilles' honor. So
I don't even know
I
if
think
I
it's
think
more
that's
about
true.
that than
Like,
the
I think
death.
Achilles ruins his own honor, to be frank.
Yeah,
Oh, for sure.
definitely.
But,
Yeah.
anyways, she's got beef with him. So, partly to train Achilles, and then I think also partly to get him away from Patroclus, she signs him up to go to school with Chiron in the woods. It's basically like hero training. Like, this is how Hercules was trained and everything. And so Achilles leaves. They have this like moment where Patroclus like kisses him, and then they Achilles like runs away, and then he leaves the next day to go to training, and then Patroclus is like, I cannot do this, and so he runs and follows, and then they meet up in the woods, and then they both become trained by Chiron, because Chiron is like, hey Thetis, stuff it, like the man can stay, let him stay, he's a good
Yeah.
man, Savannah.
True. I love that Chiron like knows what it means for him to
Mm-hmm.
basically like be blowing off a goddess and still just like lets it happen.
Yeah,
He knows.
Yeah.
yeah,
He knows for sure.
yeah.
And that
We
kind of
we
leads to
stand.
like the early stages of their relationship too.
Yep.
Um
Hmm.
and I thought it was really cool how they started out as like really close friends and built a really slow foundation, which a lot of times we don't really see in books. Like it was very much a slow burn from the beginning. And it was clear
Hmm.
that they loved each other, and most importantly, it was clear like why they loved each other, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't
Hmm.
just like instant love. It was like no, they actually like had a good foundation of friendship first. And yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. I think like for me, um, the why they love each other is because Madeline Miller did a really great job of building up these little tiny moments that add up to that. So like the way that Patroclus says that Achilles always says his name really slow when everyone else says his name really fast. Like they can't wait to get it over with. And it's like
Oh,
that little tiny detail that like it just melts your
so
heart, you know, when
sweet.
you
I
read it.
can't. Yeah.
And like there
Yeah.
is so much of like obviously Achilles is very beautiful and he's very impressive and powerful, but there was so much of the little stuff between them that the romance became more than just what we get in a lot of other books, which is like he's hot. He's the hottest in the school. He's such a hot boy and I can't wait to sleep with him. Like it was more than that. I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I think too, like mentioning that kind of like line, Maddie. I think what's really sweet. I wish I had gone through and like highlighted some of them, but
Mhm.
there's just so many sweet, like cute little lines or, like yeah, about Achilles really seeing him and just I don't
Mhm.
know, it's so wholesome. And it's just really
Hmm.
I really like Chiron.
Mhm.
And I love too that speaking of like the small moments, it's things too, like they're not just training for battle, right? They're also learning things like how to cook or like I think that they were like going around like scavenging like mushrooms and stuff. Like I don't know, it's just very
In medicine,
peaceful.
they learned about like medicine and
Mhm.
surgery.
Right, which is of course like important for Patroclus in particular, like later in the story. But yeah, it is. It's such a like peaceful little happy
It's just a
part of the
wholesome
book.
time.
It's
I
so
loved it. I
wholesome.
was eating the
It's
book
so
I
up
cute.
also
through this point.
I also liked how Chiron like was just minding his own business. Like it was probably pretty apparent that
Oh
Patroclus and
yeah.
Achilles had a relationship,
He
but he just
knew.
minds his own business, and I like that.
Yeah. He's very much
Yeah.
like, hey, if it ain't bugging me, so y'all do what y'all need, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, exactly.
um,
Yeah, no, I loved him. He was sweet. So
But
I
someone
think
who
we should
didn't
go
mind their
back
own
to
business.
Thetis. Yeah, I think we should go back to Thetis a little bit and talk about her. Basically, like we said, Thetis is a goddess and she hates Patroclus, and she's really powerful. In my opinion, she was pretty much the only strong woman, like woman who was represented as being a strong
Mm,
woman in the book. So how could I not like
that's true.
love her or love to hate her? Maybe because she was a little bit of a villain, but she obviously wanted what was best for her son, and she did come around in the end, obviously not to spoil it. So she turned out to like make the right decision in the end. So
Yeah,
I liked Thetis.
she was like a constant thorn in our side, especially on like Mount
yeah.
Pelion. Like she just kept showing up and being like, "By the way, get this kid out of here." And Achilles was like, "No, I will not be doing that." I hated her, but like in the best way. Like she was such a good
Yeah.
Hmm.
little antagonist, little thorn in our side of like the constant trying to pull them apart. And I think particularly this served as a really good lever for Achilles to show his devotion to Patroclus, because it would have been really easy to write this in a way where it was like Patroclus is so devoted to Achilles, he's the star, Achilles is like kind of like a passive person in this relationship, like just chilling. He likes having his little boy around, like whatever. But instead,
Right.
because of Thetis and other people in the book, but primarily Thetis, he has to constantly fight to keep Patroclus's place next to him. And so I really like that we get to see it from both sides, that like Achilles is also really valuing Patroclus in this way and his place in Achilles' life, even when it's extremely difficult for Achilles to do that and to carve that space for him.
Hmm.
Definitely. I think that's a great point. And especially too, like for Achilles to not only, it's not only a matter of pissing off his mom, it's pissing off a god, right? A goddess.
Yep.
So he's potentially risking a lot by his devotion to Patroclus, the same way Patroclus is risking a lot by his devotion to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I liked her a lot and that I hated her. But I also think too, again, not to jump ahead, but just her coming full circle and the ending and stuff too. And like I like so support women's rights and also women's wrongs. But
True.
most importantly, women's wrongs. And so I think to your point, Kaylee, about she's doing these things because she wants to protect him. I think that is true. But I think that what I like about her character is that she's written in such a way where you're not really sure, like, is it because she cares about Achilles, or is it because she cares about the image of Achilles, right? This is her son,
Yeah.
this is her legacy. And I think it's a bit of both. I think ultimately the last scene kind of brings us full circle of like when she's getting to recount all these special things about him and decides like, you know what, this is someone who knows my son. I want him to go in peace and, you know, be in the afterlife with him. But I like that she is a complicated character, not only in the way that she pisses you off, but like you wonder what her motivations are. So
Yeah.
yeah, she's a good
That's a
character.
good
She's
point.
interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think too, Abby, like, so from what I understand, I don't know a lot about Thetis, but from what I understand, like she's a relatively new goddess because she kind of like was made and then she had Achilles like very soon after, if not immediately.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
so he's like her first son, and so to me that also makes a lot of sense why she acts the way she does, because she's a baby goddess, you know. She's got to get her clout,
Yeah.
she's
She
got
has
to
to
make
prove
her way in
herself.
life. And then I think by the end, not to jump ahead, but like when she gets that second chance with Achilles' son and it sucks, she realizes what she had with Achilles and like where she went wrong. And I think we see her character development through that.
Yes.
And that's when she finally comes around to Patroclus, you know. And I think that's really, I don't know, she was just written in a very good way. I love
Yeah,
her.
she was very interesting, a very interesting character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love a character
Yeah.
that I hate,
That I
you
hate.
know.
Yeah.
So, love to hate. Love to hate. Love to hate. So as Achilles and Patroclus were training with Chiron, after that we have the news that Paris of Troy has kidnapped Helen. Basically, Achilles and Patroclus are called back and to Achilles' home in Pythia, and they're informed that this war they're informed that she has been kidnapped, which we know means that a war is going to break out. So Paris kidnaps Helen, and all the boys are rounded up to be asked if they'd like to go to war. And Patroclus thinks for a second that he'll have to go because of his oath, but then he doesn't. And Achilles also decides not to go at this time. So Thetis kidnaps Achilles and takes him to Epirus, a neighboring kingdom, to hide in from the draft for when the war gets more intense. She marries him to the king's daughter in secret, and the daughter, Didamia, how do we say it? Didamia? Didamia?
And Daedamia. Yeah.
D-mommy.
Didamia.
D-mommy.
She becomes pregnant. And so then Patroclus finds them there, and drama ensues, of course, because he's found out that Achilles is going to be a dad, basically.
Yeah.
So
this part of the book was, I don't know. It was, I don't,
It was weird.
I can't even articulate.
It just was
It
weird.
was weird.
There's a lot of
It was
weird
kind of
stuff.
unnecessary.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that Achilles needed to have a son, but he could have definitely done that with like Brees. He could have had a son with her instead of Daedamia.
D-mommy.
These names are so hard.
D-mommy.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it just could have been, this part could have been cut out. I don't know.
Yeah, so like this is part of Achilles' real lore, so I get why we had to go through it, but I don't really know if Patroclus like should have been there. Like that's not part of the lore. He was a weird addition to this part of the book. I think it almost would have made more sense if like Achilles is gone, we don't know where he is, and then maybe Patroclus finally decides to join the war at some point, and then that's kind of where they reunite, because Patroclus being kind of just like accepted in this kingdom, and like again we kind of get this thing where it's like everyone knows what's going on, but like they're not addressing it, they're just kind of pretending it's not there, and they're just like gal pals. D-mommy hates Patroclus, obviously, and they have a weird relationship. I
did hate that.
it.
Especially knowing now, like again, I wasn't familiar with this from a myth standpoint, so like I didn't realize that Patroclus doesn't go there and stuff in the original, and that really makes me feel a way about this section, because I do understand why she is becomes the mother of like Achilles,
Mm-hmm.
Achilles' son, and I actually can totally see why it's her, because I feel like, she's kind of filled with a lot of resentment and things with
Yeah.
like how things go down. And then once we meet her son at the end of the book, he is this kind of like more evil character, right? So I can almost like see that vitriol like in him a bit,
Yeah.
but I don't think the Patroclus part makes sense then to have that happen. That seems unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was gross. And another thing I didn't like, it didn't make sense to me. I guess this is the history, and I'm complaining about the history, but another thing that didn't make sense to me was how they couldn't tell that Achilles wasn't a woman because he's been
Mm.
training for years. He's
He's
a big,
broad.
strong
Yeah.
warrior, and I get that they had talked about how he looks a little bit feminine, like with his hair and
Mm-hmm.
face or whatever, but how could you not tell by his body that he wasn't a woman?
That's a good point, because I think that it was more normal, perhaps at the time, like that wouldn't have been as shocking at the time in terms of like his physical, like his features, like his face. But that does bring up a good point of like his build, if it is the way that we're told in the book.
Yeah, I wonder what
I guess
like
it
the
depends on how
clothing
old he was at
styles
this
were
point.
too. Like if it was
Yeah,
kind of more of the flowy like
yeah, I might be
robe.
missing something there. Yeah,
But I
That's
think it's a good
true.
point. Like I don't know. It's just strange from top to bottom, and it's also kind of weird because like we get this like commentary from Patroclus that he's kind of into Achilles as a woman too, and so it's kind of like, are we a bi baby? Is that what we're? Is that the? But then we're like not really going
hi
down the path.
baby.
But then like I don't know. It's all a little strange, and I didn't really understand
Yeah,
the purpose of dedicating so much of the book to this story beat when it didn't really seem like we needed to do all that. Like how fun would it have been to have like an Achilles son reveal that like Patroclus didn't even know. I mean, he was like, oh, you
right.
have
Or
a
like, ooh.
son?
or even if,
Yeah, that would
or
have been cool.
or even if Patroclus like just didn't go here, and then he and Achilles are reunited in a different way at some point, and he
Right.
finds out Achilles tells him the truth that he has a son,
Yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
and like if he basically recounts some of this to him without it being like the entire section of the book, I think that would
Yeah.
probably work better.
And I think too, like, not to drag this out, but like, I think this is a point where we start to, like, this is the point where Patroclus's path becomes so intertwined with Achilles' path that I think he stops developing as a character, because this would have been a great opportunity for him to be apart from Achilles, to get some yearning and some mourning and some whatever, but also it would have
Mm-hmm.
been really cool if maybe he, stayed with Chiron and learned more about medicine and surgery. And we could see kind of like him find his passion and his place in life and what he loves to do apart from Achilles, because we just did not get a lot of that.
That's a good
Um,
point.
and
Yeah,
so
this whole section could probably be utilized differently in the story,
Right. With
Mhm.
treat Patroclus like an individual, because it's very true that like historically his name is only brought up with Achilles, and I think this would have been a really great opportunity to treat him like
Mm,
he is a deserving main character in his own story, you know?
that's
Especially
very
because it's
true.
Put
from
some
his
respect.
POV.
Yeah, put some respect on his name. That's what I thought. I was so excited when this was from Patroclus's point of view instead of Achilles' point of view,
Yeah,
because I thought, oh, like I love the concept of like a story being told from a side character's POV and like
right.
building that out. But I think it ended up just being a story told from like a side character's POV.
That's a
Hmm.
great point. That is an excellent point. That could have been used for so many different things. So,
Yeah.
good point.
Anywho, so eventually, the love and light of our lives, Odysseus, shows up and he tricks Achilles into revealing himself, because Achilles can just not help but be the light of the center of the universe. And he's like, ah, gotcha. And he's like, do you want to go to war now? And Achilles is like, not really, but I guess I will do it. And so this is where we start the section of the book where we get war and so much war and then more war, and then you may think the war is over, but the war is not over. And to be fair, this is kind of Achilles' fault, because there's a prophecy where it is said Achilles will die after he kills Hector, who is kind of the Achilles of the Trojans. Okay, he's the badass, but Achilles is better than him, and everyone knows this. And so simply, Achilles is like, I will do the war, but I just won't kill Hector. I'll let him keep getting away, and then I can't die, because that has to happen before I die.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of this, the war drags on for like 10 years, because like the fates, the domino is blocked. The domino cannot fall. And
Right.
it just feels like such a slug through to me. Like it was boring. I don't like war that much, and like it was a lot. And I get why we don't want to kill Hector. But I was like, God damn, like can we do something? Like, my God, I'm dying.
I agree.
Yeah.
Normally, I'm 100% here for war scenes. Y'all know this about me. But this war went on forever. And it was like the most underwhelming war I had ever heard of in my life, because none of here I am complaining about the history again, but it's like none of the main people die. And then it's like literally they describe it and they're like, yeah, we just kind of meet up on the beach and battle it out at a certain time every day.
Yeah.
And then we like take a break. And that's the consensus between both
Yeah.
sides. Like,
Yeah.
rather than an ongoing war with more raids and like things like that, which is more realistic. And it's like, it was just described in a really underwhelming way. And I wasn't here for it.
Yeah, I think the actual like battle scenes themselves and stuff like definitely drag on. I think though that like yeah, and I'm trying to think of things that kind of happen in the interim, and I know that we'll talk about some other characters we meet in a second, but I think what it does though, getting back to your point, Maddie, of like this kind of is Achilles' fault because he's the one that decides to not kill Hector or to take forever to do it. Again, I don't know that this is made, the connection is made like explicit. I wish it were more explicit, but as things are dragging on, I wish that connection was made a little bit more of like, because I understand why it's important that it drags on for the sake of the story and for the sake of understanding why Achilles is being selfish, and he is like, it makes sense, but it still does drag. So
yeah,
like,
exactly. Like I'm sure this was Madeline Miller's intention, because it literally feels like everything comes to like a stalemate, because it does. Like the plot cannot go on because it's being prevented, but it was also difficult to read. And I don't know how, I think maybe like you're saying, like a little bit more conflict where he gets called out on this sooner or more often would be easier to read, and he does get called out on it once later.
Yeah.
So people know. I just I don't know.
Yeah.
We
or
just
like
needed
something
more
that's
from it.
interesting as I'm thinking about it too, because there are a couple of things that happen that I think are interesting. So one being when the little mini like plague goes around. I'm pretty sure this is sometime. I don't even know where we're at in the 10 years of war, but that, and then when there's basically a thought of all the soldiers like overthrowing, like turning against what's his name? Guy's name starts with A. Big name. Yeah, Mr. A. We'll call him that. So when my brain is like, okay, the one that starts with an A, the other one starts with A. What's interesting too is because there's so much, anger towards him, which makes sense because he sucks. But it's interesting too that like in that moment, the frustration that all the soldiers have about the fact that this isn't going anywhere is directed at him when, there's another culprit for that.
And like
Achilles,
their friends are dying and their people are dying. And I just think someone would have gotten pissed off before that. At least one person.
Right. Who's going to tell
Especially
because someone tell him.
Achilles' his main thing is he's like, well, Hector hasn't done anything to me, so I have no reason to kill him.
It's like, girl.
And it was so dumb and simple. It was so simple.
Yeah, that was annoying.
Too, like, okay, here's another thing is like the intro to Patroclus in the beginning of the book is like we're told he's simple, and I think throughout the book, we I don't think he's simple in the sense that like he's stupid. I think he's just like he can say how it is, and he expects people to tell him how it is, and like that's just how they're gonna be. And so, but Achilles, I'm kind of like, this motherfucker might be simple because he do not be thinking critically. And like part of like the original lore too is like Patroclus is Achilles' right hand man because he's very wise and he's like a trusted advisor to Achilles who has like all this power and all this ability, and we don't
Right.
see that. And I think that could have been another angle to take to make this part more interesting, where Patroclus is kind of involved in the advising and the decision making because he's brought into these circles by default by being Achilles' right hand man. And instead we kind of get him just standing in Achilles' shadow and like whispering little things occasionally in Achilles' ear, and then Achilles is like, I want to do this, and they're like, okay, so Patroclus wants to do that, okay, we get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would love to see him more in an advisor role because I want to say too that, am I remembering correctly that at one point Patroclus confronts him about the fact that this is more like when later on he decides he's not going to fight, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
Patroclus confronts him about it, and he says something about like, don't talk about it again, like don't bring it up again. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
think, I think, and then it gets shut down instead of
Mm-hmm.
Patroclus, like, because he's not going to hurt Patroclus, so it's more
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, like, be brave, like, confront him
Yeah.
again. You
Mm-hmm.
can get through to him,
You are the
so
only
yeah,
one that he will listen to,
right. That he will
literally.
listen to, literally.
I
So,
completely agree. And I think that's where, like, I think Maddie makes his point in our little doc that we take notes on. But um, basically, Achilles takes, like, the typical man, like, masculine role in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and Patroclus takes, like, the more feminine role in the relationship. And so Achilles, like, has all this power that Patroclus, like, doesn't have, and he doesn't really have a voice in their relationship towards the end. And I just like their relationship to me just went like way downhill, and I get that it's supposed to, but I wish Patroclus had had more of a voice and like
Mm-hmm.
an active role in their relationship instead of just being
mhm.
like, okay, well, Achilles doesn't want to do that, so
Yeah.
oh well, you know.
Right, like this more kind of like dominant and submissive kind of,
Yeah.
just he just kind of goes along with things and is in the background. And I think, it makes sense. Sure, like even if he is not the main fighter, he
Mm-hmm.
still was trained. And beyond that, things like his skills with medicine and his smarts and everything, like his, intelligence, I think that makes him very much a powerful figure if he
Yeah.
could use it in the book, so.
Yeah. And I think my thing is like they got slotted into the war wife and the war husband roles, and I've never, and there are variations of every Greek myth, but like I've always gotten the impression that it was very much like, because societally men are treated differently, these are two equals in society in a relationship together, and how different that plays out in Greek society when both people in the relationship are in a position of power and respect where they have a
Mhm.
voice.
Mm-hmm.
And Patroclus just does not use his societal power in any meaningful way. Like he almost shoves himself in a corner behind Achilles and feels like Achilles is the only lever, and that might be an intentional choice. But what I really wanted to see for Patroclus's character development is like, because Achilles sees him and treats him with respect, he knows he's worth more than how he was treated, and so he grows with that. He uses that ability, not just fades into the background. And even if it was like, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be through fighting too, like it can be through medicine, but we need more of it. Like I need to see more of
Yeah.
Patroclus being really invested in healing people, not just a passing conversation where he says, I've healed everyone in the camp and I know all their names. That's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
and like his brute strength too, like could really come into play here, where it's like sometimes for a bone to heal, it has to get broken again. So like it could all be tied up into that, and him using his strength to do healing and kindness and support and whatever that he wants, but we just didn't get it. He just sat at home with the girls and like chitty chatted while fucking knitting, you
Which,
know?
Yeah.
to be fair, to be fair, yeah, no, I agree. I think that he had a lot to offer beyond that for sure. Like, I do think that the whole like kind of subplot of them taking care of these girls and stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
I did find that really
I like
interesting, and
that, yeah.
especially because I think Patroclus is the one who really makes the effort to
It's the
do
one thing
that,
he does.
and like it's yeah, he cares about that, and it's important to him, and so I did like that. But I think circling back to what you were saying too, Maddie, about like, wondering, it's probably intentional that he takes this kind of backseat role.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it actually brings up a good kind of question. Like at the end of the day, with this book, it's called the Song of Achilles, but it's told through Patroclus's perspective, and so it's
Mm-hmm.
like, wondering, is it Madeline's main goal to show
Mm.
us Patroclus, who we don't get much of the story of, and to actually tell his side? Or is it to talk about Achilles through the lens of the person who like loved him and knew him most? And so I really wish we'd get
Mm.
more Patroclus generally,
Yeah.
but I do also understand why, like, because Patroclus kind of taking a back seat is not only like says a lot about him, but it says a lot about Achilles, right? Because Achilles comes home at the end of the day and he's like telling the details of like how he's killed and stuff, and he's
Mm-hmm.
becoming more self-centered, and he's not willing to
Mm-hmm.
go fight, and he demands this apology, and like, so this
Yeah.
smallness of Patroclus highlights how out of hand I think that Achilles gets. So I agree with you. I'd like to see more Patroclus, but I can also understand it for like the sake of emphasizing like what Achilles becomes, like the
Yeah.
terrible thing that he becomes.
I think that's
So
fair.
it's, yeah,
I
I
also
wanted this
found
more
but
myself
Patroclus.
wondering, like, yeah. And I found myself wondering, like, why is Patroclus, like, so in love with him at this point? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because, like, you can fall out of love, and it's like,
that's true.
how
Mm-hmm.
can you be in love with someone that, like, only cares about their honor and their power,
Mm-hmm.
like, power, you know,
I
and
definitely
how
had that
powerful they
moment as a
are.
reader.
And I was like, why is he putting up with this? Like, Achilles is not treating him well at all, and he needs to stand up for himself and say, I don't deserve that, especially
Mm-hmm.
when Achilles is like, don't bring it up again. And
Yeah.
and Patroclus is just like weak, and he's like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I didn't get it.
yeah.
Yeah. And that really makes me think of Bresis, who is she's the first woman that Patroclus kind of rescues from these like war prizes. It's a gross concept in general, and so he gets
Yeah.
Achilles to kind of claim these women as much as he can so that they don't go to the other princes and kings that are going to mistreat them in many ways. And
Mm-hmm.
so he kind of like becomes the like head hen of this little roost of women that he's like collecting, for lack of a better term, women that he's protecting, I guess is a better way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
We know what you mean.
And
Yeah.
the first woman is Bresis. I heard the audiobook the whole time, okay? And so I didn't know her name had a B. I thought she was Rhesus. And so I thought of her as my little peanut butter cup. All right. She's my little girl.
No,
I love her. She's
not the peanut butter cup.
she's my little peanut butter cup. All right. And she's just like
She is a
very
sweetie.
sweet. And her and Patroclus have a really interesting relationship. And this was like the one redeeming part of this part of the book, I think, for me, because it's Patroclus on his own, developing relationships on his own. It's someone else seeing him in a different way than Achilles seeing him, and seeing the value in what he brings. And he does start to kind of catch feelings, and I don't fully know if they're romantic feelings, but she becomes someone that's just extremely important to him. And she falls in love with him. And she even is like, you want to have a baby? And he's like, She maybe, I don't know. I'll think about it though. Like, damn. Oh shit. And they're just very cute together. They're just like little besties, and she's just like this little third, you know. And to the Achilles and Patroclus, she's just their little third, and she's like, I'm just happy to be here. Except also, like, Achilles does not pay any
Breeze's.
attention to her.
No, he
Yeah.
He does
doesn't
not
care
give
about
a
her at
fuck.
all.
No, he doesn't.
No.
But Patroclus very much cares, I think. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I really liked her. It was, of course, really sad to see how she was treated, along with like the other women who are like hurt by this. But yeah, I thought, yeah, not only was it great to see her character, but also to see the side of Patroclus and to kind of wonder, like, what if with them, and I think too, like, to force him to also think about things like, yeah, what future does he see for himself? But yeah, it's still really sad how everything ends up with her.
Yeah.
To me, she was cool, I guess, but I wish she were presented as more of a prominent character in the book. But this will come, I'll talk about this more in my hot take, but women are kind of treated like an accessory to propel the plot in this book. So it wasn't really surprising to me that she wasn't more prominent, but I just wanted more dialogue from her, more personality. But yeah, we just didn't get that. So.
No. And to your point, Abby, about like, we're talking about like him maybe, and Kaylee, you said like he should be falling out of love with Achilles, and like how he feels about Breezus and all this. I think this could have been really hit on a lot more, because he does end up making a choice where he chooses Breezus over Achilles. And I feel like it's presented more as like he can't live with the morals of not making that choice, versus what I think is probably more accurate, which is at this point in his life, Breezus is more important to him than Achilles is, and is giving him more than Achilles is in terms of like a fulfilling relationship. And that's why he makes the choice that he does.
Yeah. Right. Whether it's romantic or just a deep friendship,
just
like
partnership.
Yeah, partnership. And I'm inclined, like, personally, reading to that point, I'm inclined to think that even if his romantic feelings for Achilles are stronger, I kind of read it as there are some budding like romantic feelings. But regardless, yeah, like you said, like he is not willing to see her hurt. And
anyway.
Yeah, and so he betrays Achilles in doing that, and like for good reason. So that kind of then leads us to toward the end of the book, where Patroclus can't really bear to stand by and watch the Greeks just get demolished in this war anymore, and he can't just stand by and observe all these things, and so he ends up planning to wear Achilles' armor and go into battle to trick the Trojans into thinking it's Achilles coming to the retreat, because Achilles is choosing not to fight, and so he can at least convince him to allow him to dress as him and appear to be him in battle, so that it'll at least make them think that he's there. So it works at first, and then Apollo decides that he is not going to let Patroclus get away with this. And so then Patroclus is pretty quickly killed by Hector. Which then, of course, brings Achilles out for revenge. And so he kills Hector. Apollo is mad and helps Paris kill him. Everyone loses and is sad. And it's a very epic and kind of just busy ending with, or sort of ending with everything happening.
It very much feels like as soon as that one domino falls, it's like pop, 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 pop. Like we're making up for lost time. The fates are like, thank God. Like
it happens so fast. Yeah.
To your point, for it to be such a big deal, I wondered why, to me at least, this might just be my opinion, but I wondered why Madeline Miller made Patroclus' death so underwhelming. Like it was like we weren't even 100% sure that he died for a minute there, because his POV keeps going, and I don't know, I just felt like his death should have been a bigger deal. Like it should have been like, and that was the last breath I breathed, or something dramatic like that.
The breath I broke.
Broke.
I let out the breath I didn't know I was holding.
The
Cut.
last breath. I
Yeah,
didn't know I was holding.
literally.
Not the cursed line. Not
Oh.
the cursed line. Yeah, no, it's surprising, I think, how fast it all happens with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, to switch to his ghosty POV, which I really like. But it is hard to see the transition. There's not a lot of ceremony around it, or transition.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. It just kind of, you did now.
He did now. Yeah, I really liked the ghosty POV. I liked how she wrote the feeling powerless and Patroclus like trying to still have an influence as a ghosty, like whispering to people in their sleep and stuff, but it just not working out because he's like a ghost. And so even like Odysseus at one point tries to help and it just doesn't happen. But it did make me feel definitely different about Achilles. The fact that he was so freaking stubborn about not fighting, and like also the fact that it was over just like the dumbest petty argument
Mm-hmm.
of like, I'm disrespected, so I'm not gonna do this. And like I think that's the point of it, so I acknowledge that. But I was like,
Right.
God, I really don't like you by this point. You know, like I am
No.
not an Achilles person by the end of this book. I'm like, you are so selfish and self-absorbed, and it's like crazy to me because I still think Achilles genuinely values Patroclus and like cares about him. And the fact that Patroclus is like, I'm going to do this, and Achilles is like,
Mm-hmm.
go on then, and then acts surprised that Patroclus dies. I'm like, you dumb motherfucker, like what did you think was gonna
Right.
happen? Like do something, do anything, you know? Like you don't want the Trojans to win. Like you're just gonna sit here and be petty. And I think some of that credit or blame goes to Thetis too, because I think for whatever reason, like her influence grew on him by this point, probably because his ego was growing and she's also going to be feeding into that and like whispering in his ear more. And she was very much
Yeah.
like, we ain't giving in, baby, and I got Zeus on my side too. And it's like, what is going on right now?
Yeah, over something
That's
so petty, like
So
you said.
petty.
and that's actually an interesting point too, Maddie, because to be honest, like I wasn't thinking that her influence on him was growing. I was thinking that it was just his ego and
Yeah.
pride was growing, and like he was getting so blinded by that that like he just straight up wasn't thinking rationally. Like you said, it's not because he doesn't care about Patroclus. I think he does,
Mm-hmm.
but he's just getting blinded
Yeah.
by how obsessed he is with his own image and obsessed with doing it the way he wants to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was crazy when he just like lets him go off and do that. I mean, obviously you can kind of figure out what's coming at that point, but
Yeah.
And I
which that
do
was a
think
cool
he's
scene, I will
yeah.
say. When he rides, I thought so. When he rides
Yeah, it was a
into
really
like
cool
on the
scene.
chariot and stuff, it's kind of weird to not like we talked about earlier, like for him not to be built up as this warrior and then to go like taking spears.
They're like, he actually killed someone, and I'm like, of course he did. Like he's
Like not just someone, but like
He's been
the
trained
second highest
trained to
behind
do that.
Hector, right?
yeah, he
Yeah.
trained next to
So
Achilles.
I did
He's
really
got
like that
skill.
scene, but
Yeah.
then it just ends kind of abruptly. So
Yeah.
And I
yeah.
was gonna say, I think Achilles' feelings to Patroclus become secondary to his like yearn for
Mm-hmm.
power, unfortunately. So I think
Yeah.
while he did care for Patroclus, he realized that too little too late. Like obviously he didn't realize that. Oh, Piper.
Little Piper.
Cat appearance.
Cat
Sorry,
appearance.
continue.
He didn't yeah, I think he didn't realize like how much he had let his feelings for Patroclus like fall behind
Mm-hmm.
until Patroclus was dead. And so
It is kind of interesting, like in that in the sense that I think they both became secondary to each other in priority. So it's like Achilles fell in love with his fame and his star power and his ego, and Patroclus fell in love with his partnership with Reese's peanut butter cup. And so this is what is the result. You know, they both die in a horrendous series of events because they stopped valuing each other. But like part of me, this is another moment that was really cute and I wish it had come back, is like in the beginning Achilles is like, tell me a hero story that doesn't end in tragedy, and there is none. And he's like, mine won't because of you. And
Yeah.
like that moment is so cute. And I
Oof.
really wanted Patroclus to be like, do you remember when you made this vow? Like, you're choosing to not have
Ow.
a happy ending, you know? Like, it would have been such an emotional moment. And like, I don't know. I would, the whole, that's what I was screaming at Achilles. Is like, my brother in Christ, like, you're choosing to not have a happy ending right now.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I forgot about that whole line. Oh, there's
Yeah,
so
that one
many of
hurted.
those
So
that
many.
hurted, and there's so many of those like that. Again, one thing I wish I would have like highlighted or bookmarked like the
Mm-hmm.
pages with those because I think that adds so much to the story when you find these little one
Yeah.
lines that
Yeah.
they hurt.
They
Pain.
hurt. And talking of pain, the rest of the book is misery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Great.
after they die, you know, Achilles' final wish, because he knows he's gonna go kill Hector for vengeance, and which means he's gonna die. He's like, I only want one thing from you bastards, and that is to be buried with my beloved, Patroclus. And they're like, bet. And then he dies, and then Achilles' son shows up, who's been raised by Thetis this whole time. So he's a just
And he's 12.
he's 12, and he's such a
Sucks.
brat. He is, oh, I hate him. And he's like, he calls like Patroclus like a slave, and he's like, slaves can't get buried with their master, and just like all this wretched behavior. And everyone's like, well, okay, you're right. And it's awful. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
It's it's awful, but like I know we just talked about, but I did really like the idea of like being in Patroclus's like spirit POV
Mm-hmm.
and just like I think the aftermath of everything was just as important. Of course, Achilles is the one who is honored in death. Of course,
Yes, that's true.
no one listens, or they just think Patroclus is a nobody and like doesn't
Mm-hmm.
care to honor him. And I love the ending with Thetis of her sitting there and Achilles finally getting through to her and
Mm-hmm.
recounting all these special things that he loved about or sorry, Patroclus recounting things about that he loved about Achilles, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
like all these beautiful things, and she finally decides like, okay, like let me help you, let's
Yeah.
honor you too. And like, I will say that ending will stick with me, and like the last paragraph, it's so beautiful when they reunite, and it's just,
Yeah.
oh,
And
it's so good.
I think it's a great, also going back to like Thetis and her character development. She like tells Patroclus basically like, tell me about my son. And so for the first time, I think she's really considering like who Achilles was as a person rather than as a legacy. And so the only person that knows that is Patroclus, because she never bothered to get to know Achilles beyond
And
that.
no one did.
No one
Yeah.
did. And so him being able to give her that as, you know, a sense of closure, and him also just, I just got the sense the way that it was written that like he was so excited to be able to share that with her and to talk about Achilles in
Right.
that way. And it's like, okay, another line, another cute thing, right? And I want to add all of the romanticy writers right now, okay? Y'all better listen up. You better turn up the volume. You better write this down. This is how you do a recurring cutesy relationship phrase, okay? You use it
Yeah.
once or twice in the beginning to establish it, and then I should not read it again until an emotional moment. And
Retweet.
in
Yeah.
this scene, we get the and this and this and this and this and this, which was like previously used to tell us basically like how well Achilles and Patroclus like could just talk to each other about anything, and this and this and all the things he loved about Achilles, and this and this and this and this. And it's used in this scene to talk about all of his memories about Achilles and all the things he loves about Achilles that he's telling
Oh,
Thetis. And it just like, it made me tear up. It's making me tear up even a little bit right now because it was just like so sweet and so well used. And it called back to like that part of the book that I loved, which was just like when their
yeah.
relationship was really building. And It was so good. And a shout out to Fraser Douglas, who narrated the audiobook, because every time he says this line, especially now, like, he narrates it just like so well with such good emphasis, and like it was great. It was great. I See You, King. You knocked it out of the park.
Eat it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sad now.
I'm sorry.
I feel sad now.
I know. Or like, the part too where they
Piper.
attack.
sorry, cat on the keyboard break. I had to mute. The part where they like reunite, you know, at the very end, and it says this thing about them like joining hands, and it was like just like this flood of light or whatever it is. It describes it beautifully, but
it's tough.
It hurts. It's tough, but it was good.
It's a good
strong
ending.
Great ending.
It was a
great
good ending.
Yeah.
And like, thank God, after the slodge of war. Oh my God. I was so ready.
Give me a little something. Yeah.
I need a little treat for me. So
a little reward.
Yeah. Really got through
It'll pay off.
But yeah.
Yeah. Great ending.
Yep. All right. So now it's time for everyone's favorite part of the podcast, which is our hot takes and pour overs. So I'll go first. My hot take is that Madeline Miller had the opportunity to write a true retelling and remove some of the misogyny and poor treatment towards women, and she did not do this. And this is something that killed me throughout the book, and it was really painful to read, especially coming from a female author. It was really weird to me how she like changed some details. Like we had kind of talked about in this episode, she changed like a few details throughout the book from history and from ancient Greek history, and she did not change this. And it was just all really uncomfortable, painful to read, and I don't get the point of doing a retelling if you're not changing much. Like, you're changing just little tiny details, you know?
Yeah, no, this is a wholehearted retweet for me, because several times it gave me the ick towards like Patroclus, because I'm like, I don't like you when you talk about women this way and you're kind of like ascribing to this culture. Like, it doesn't make you a sympathetic character to me. And there were people in the society that thought differently, like Odysseus, as we see over and over again in the book. And it was weird to me for her to acknowledge him as like a sympathetic or maybe like progressive character in that way, and to not like ascribe that to Patroclus, because like, why not, you know? Like, if he ain't on the books as like a terrible person, why not make him more sympathetic or like use his voice in that way? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's my thing, is that I understand the references to some of the stuff, again, like understanding like the historical thing at the time, but I will say, particularly for his POV, like we've established, there was an opportunity, and I get that neither of these characters are perfect, and that's made pretty clear, but there was an opportunity to do something there, at least through his perspective and how he views things. So yeah.
Right. 100%. My pour over is our man Odysseus. Okay, I don't know anything about ancient Greek mythology, ancient Greek history, but I'm really rooting for Odysseus because he's an MVP. Okay, like, he's a king, and I want what's best for him, and I hope he reunites with his wife and they live a happily ever after. So yeah,
she's rooting for him.
She's rooting for
Odysseus. I am too.
I am too.
Right. Tune in next week when we find out that he's a completely terrible character and we retract everything we just said. But I agree. Book version? Agreed.
Book version?
Agreed. I don't know anything about the other one.
He's pretty solid in the actual mythology lore, but he goes through it. He does end up having like a pretty happy ending, but the man be struggling after the war ends. Like, the war is just the beginning of the Odyssey, and that's a whole book. So we are rooting for him, but it didn't help him.
Can't believe you're spoiling the Odyssey.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Spoiler alert, this is what happens in the Odyssey. If you haven't read it.
I will read you a passage from my Greek myths book.
The Odyssey, hot new book of 2024.
True. Anticipated releases.
Go back and listen to last week's episode. It's on there.
Mood.
So along with the Bible.
That's right.
Along with the Bible, hot new take, hot new read. So my hot take was that I wish we would have gotten more. It's not like a super spicy take, but still, I wish we would have gotten more context for Helen's story. And before this episode, our resident myth queen Maddie was giving me some of the rundown. So I get why we didn't, but I do think it would have been cool to have more of her story. And again, it's on me to go into something like this and have a little bit of a working knowledge of how it works if I want to, I think, interpret it. Well, okay, not, you don't have to do that, but it's more like I understand why I couldn't think beyond the story for that, right? So if I want to think beyond the story, I would have to read it myself. But I do think though that like knowing her decision was different in the actual myth and things like that influences a lot of how I think about this story. So I don't know.
Yeah,
More
no,
Helen.
I agree. And I think too, like, and I haven't read enough maybe about like the Trojan War to know how it's treated in other places. I just kind of know a little bit of like the origin, but like for these people to be fighting this war for 10 plus years over the same ass thing, and for us to never get a conversation where they're like, what actually happened? Like, what is going on? Is this, like, I know we made an oath, but like, really? Like, we only got so many Grecians, you know? Like, what are we doing here? I think it's a little, I'm like, maybe they were all simple, you know? Like, if we're really not questioning this to any degree about, like, why are we still fighting after 10 years? I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Like, it
A critical
is
thought, please. Yeah.
anybody. And, you know, maybe that's the society ran by men. You know, maybe that's the lesson is like, if there was a woman on the council, maybe things would have turned out differently, but there wasn't. So,
right. We are just here to be men and
that's
to be
right.
men and be strong. Yeah.
Madge.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my hot take. For my pour over, I'm still thinking about Patroclus's choice to betray Achilles to protect Rhesus. I think, like you were talking about, Maddie, it really just makes us consider not only his relationship with Rhesus, but also very much with Achilles, whether it's his morals or just like how he's feeling about both of them at that time. But it's significant. It's a big moment for Patroclus. And so, yeah, it's a big scene in the book that I'm still kind of thinking about.
Yeah. Mood. Okay, so for me, my hot take is I think Patroclus deserved more than just being made out to be a war wife. Just straight up, I think making them fit into the mold of like a classic husband and wife roles was just like very derivative and like not very interesting. I think it's giving very much like when straight people ask queer couples like, which one of you is the woman and which one of you is the man? Like, that's not how that works. And so we don't need to follow that. Like, that's not how every relationship needs to be. It was totally possible for Patroclus to have been a perfectly standard warrior in his own right, as we talked about. He could have had a lot of character development. He could have had a lot of interesting perspectives on things. You know, he could have been an individual person in this story, and he just wasn't. He was a footnote. And I think, you know, I still think this would have been a great opportunity to tell Patroclus's story, because we know about Achilles. We know. And I want to know about Patroclus, okay? And so I was disappointed. But
I agree wholeheartedly, yeah.
More Patroclus.
more Patroclus,
Yep.
please.
I agree.
And then my pour over, for me, I'm still going to be thinking about all the sweet little things that made me love Patroclus and Achilles, and just how big of an impact that had for me on how I felt about the romance in general. I think it's just a really good example of like what good romance consists of, and how to build like that foundation to really get your readers invested in a romance and in a partnership. So I'm still, you know, laying in bed at night and I'm like, and this.
Oh.
Or like every time I say Patroclus, I'm like, am I saying it too fast? Like it's unhinged, but I'm like, I must say it slow, you know. It was good food.
Yeah. Sweet moments.
It was very cute.
Very cute.
All right. Before we go, let's go over our ratings and favorite parts of the book. So I'll go first. My rating was a 3.5 out of 5, so rounded up to a 4 on Goodreads. It was just missing a lot for me, and like we said, we wanted more Patroclus, but I can acknowledge that it was a well-written book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my 3.5 comes from. I don't think it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite part was the ending. Like we've talked about, I love the sweetness of Thetis and Patroclus finally finding some common ground, which is like their love for Achilles. I thought it was really well written, beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's the retweet
Totally.
for me. Yeah, my rating was a 3 of 5. It had too much war and ick, and I'm just a
Too much egg.
baby. But it was really well written, and like I've said 100 times, like the romance was just like it was the first quarter of the book. Just it gets me through, you know. So I give it a 3 of 5. It was not written for me. I was just really disappointed by some of the choices. So she can't be a 4 or 5 for me, but she was still good. And then my favorite part, so the ending is like legendary, let's be real. But
It's true.
for just like a small and like irrelevant part that really like shifted the way that I was feeling about the book is like the moment that Achilles and Patroclus are in class together and the teacher is like, he can't have that liar. And Achilles is like, actually, he can have any liar he damn well pleases. And it's kind of the first moment where you see Achilles use his influence to help Patroclus and to like stick up for
Mm-hmm.
him. And that was the first moment that I was like, oh, we're cooking. Like,
We're cooking.
okay. Like, you know, have me like kicking my feet and giggling a little bit. And I was like, tee,
It was
tee, tee.
cute.
You know, so just that in the sense that it starts that like really cute series of moments between them. And it's something so small, but it also is so like, I don't know, little schoolgirl moment where you're like, tee, tee, my crush like said this to the teacher for me. And it's a precious, precious moment.
Be cute. Be
Mm-hmm,
cute. Agreed.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So my rating, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I did like it quite a lot. I do have, some of the same issues with it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for things that could have been done differently. But overall, I liked it a lot. I, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good. Not a perfect 5 out of 5, but a good solid 4 for me. Um, my favorite part was, the ending goes without saying. Just chef's kiss, perfect ending. And then I've already said it earlier, but when Patroclus betrays Achilles, and I think just everything that kind of leads up to that, and when he's actually in the tent and he like slices his hands, like I don't know. I think
The
it's
drama. I had no idea
the
what Homeboy
drama.
was doing then. I was like,
I
what is
didn't
Yeah,
going
either.
on?
yeah. No, it is very much the drama. Goes back and talks to him. Like, I thought it was a really good scene, and just a big choice that I liked a lot in the book. So
Yeah, I gotta give
that
it
was
to
my fave.
Patroclus for that because when it really came down to it, he was a queen of the drama. Like he knew
Yeah,
True.
how
I'm
to
here for
set
the.
the stage.
Yeah, I was here for that. I was like, yes, let's
Yeah,
get into it. So
yeah,
big fan, big fan.
incredible. So if everyone has said their piece, that's all the tea. I don't know why I'm talking like that. That's all the tea that we have on the Song of Achilles. I used all my
Achilles.
brain cells in the discussion, clearly. So next week, we are going to be spilling the tea on the Book of Asriel by Amber V. Nicole. So very excited. I know nothing about that book. So excited to crack it open.
Same. I'm
You
ready.
can stay up to date with us on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube by following us at Spill the Novelty on all of the things. And while you're there, let us know, did this book live up to the hype for you? Do you like the Patroclus point of view? Do you feel the same way we feel? Let us know. We want to hear your hot takes and your feelings. So we will see you next week.
Bye.